minute. I guess her doctor needed to.
Who's the she?
Cherie.
Okay. Ken totally forgot about me the other day. I didn't do a closing thing at all.
Yeah, I know. He did apologize.
Did he?
Yep. He's like, oh my gosh, I messed that up. I'm sorry. And you kind of gave him a little shruggy.
If I did, I wasn't paying any attention to it. I signed out and was doing other stuff.
Oh yeah, you signed out like almost immediately after that, but it looks like you reacted to him, so that's interesting. It's really fun.
No, not intentionally.
Okay. Oh, my hair's all messy. Okay. Neil Jasper's here, and John Brodsky.
Yep.
Party. I'm gonna let him wait there for a few minutes.
That's what I would do.
Ugh. Oh, Sally's here. Okay, that's good. Okay, I'm gonna hang that up because that's too many things echoing. Okay, let me let her in. Are you ready to let Sally in at least? Oh, I can't hear you. Here, you're unmuted.
All right, so let's just finish off what we were talking about. So, let's. We probably need to schedule a rehearsal with Wheelers sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
And then go from there.
Did you hit recording?
No.
Oh, that's weird. Oh, it must be because she set it up to record automatically. Okay.
All right, so let's switch over.
All right. Yes, so I will. So let's do that. Oh God, too many things. At least these meetings are starting to end. I'm letting Sally in, okay?
Yeah, let them all in. Well, let Sally in first, but then.
Sally in first. Hi, Sally. Oh, she can't hear us yet. All right, we've got Neil Jasper, John Brodsky, and Pam Laffer right now. You ready for me to let them all in?
You bet.
Okay.
Should we let them know that we have to let them know they're being recorded?
It shows, actually, on the screen.
Hey, Neil. It's good to see you.
Oh, they're coming out. They're all coming in. Hi, everybody.
Hello. How's everybody?
Doing well. How are you, John?
Hey, Marty, unmute yourself and say hello.
It's such a beautiful day. We should have met outside.
Now you're unmuted.
Lou had to come in and warm up after he worked in the garden.
There you go.
When other people hit the mute. You okay?
Yeah, what do I do now? Just wait?
Yep, people are joining the meeting.
There we go. So I have to, when they're talking, I have to hit mute.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to, Sydney.
Oh,
We can hear you.
thanks.
You're welcome. So we're just, I was just talking to Ken and he will be here momentarily, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Who is Alert Slash? Who is Alert Slash?
Who is what?
Who is someone as Alert Slash has joined the meeting?
They haven't displayed their name yet, John. John, I never envisioned you as a technocrat here. How you been?
Good, good. Thank you. Very good, actually.
That's good.
Hi, Neil. You look good.
Hi, Pam. Steve.
Oh, Neil. Hey, Neil.
That's probably the first time we've seen each other in 4 months.
I know it.
I like the gray beard.
It's always been that color. That was started from the rabbi when he first joined.
Next thing you know, you'll be wearing a yarmulke.
I was. Hi, Jeanette.
Hello.
You know, the funny part about this, our names are under our photo, but nobody knows who's saying what to whom.
I know.
Well, actually, Neil, if you click on the icon that says participants,
Yes,
it will pop up a participant list on the right,
yes.
and it will show you who's speaking.
Oh,
The
you're
little
right, the
microphone is going, but then you have to kind of go back and forth. So it depends on how flexible your eyes are, I suppose.
Well, they're still there, but they're leaving me.
There's also a yellow square around the box of the speaker, usually, not always.
Yeah.
But it's not consistent is the problem.
Well, believe it or not, the computer gurus stayed on Windows 7, so I may not have that option.
Yeah.
Well, I thought that Ken was joining us momentarily, but
Give the guy a break. It's only
Kendra,
2
do you
minutes.
want to start us off?
Give him a couple more minutes.
Give him a couple more minutes?
Sure.
You're generous, John.
For someone who always insisted that we start on time at the temple, I've mellowed.
Can I get that recorded?
Absolutely.
We actually are recording. Everyone should
Okay.
know. There he is.
For what purpose are you recording?
I was locked out.
Are you putting it on Facebook?
I can.
No, it's not. It's not live on Facebook. It's
Okay.
just for temple members. That's why we were
Kathy Adelson.
asking for registration.
Right.
And we've tried to keep a good historical record of all of these meetings, the ones last summer and this year, the ones now, so that someday, somebody wants to do research and is looking for the records, we've got them.
Good
Yeah.
idea.
So we tried hard to keep a good historical record of it all.
All right. Well, greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Hi.
We are going to mute everyone just to allow for a little bit of upfront control anyway. So thank you for letting us do that. I don't have control, so I'm going to ask.
I got it. Wait, hang on. But then I needed to unmute you.
Thank you very much. So it's nice to see some returning faces to these calls and nice to see some new faces. I'm going to guess off the top of my head without doing a inventory, this might be the best attended call that we've had so far. It certainly looks like it in terms of non-board members and staff and clergy. The purpose of these meetings is to allow our members, allow you, our congregants, to learn more about the temporary location, the process that we went through, any information that you want about that, anything that you want to know about the sale that we can tell you, and I think we can tell you pretty much everything. So the purpose here is really to give you, though, a chance to ask questions. So to that end, we don't have much of an agenda other than as a reminder of the sacredness of the work that we do as a nonprofit religious organization. It's important for us to start all of our meetings with a prayer for community service. And so Cantor has been leading us in an opening prayer for these meetings, which isn't so much about community service. And I'll let her explain more about what we will be quickly doing. So Cantor?
Okay, yes, I'm gonna go share my screen. So bear with me while I get that up and running. Getting better at getting it up and running, but it always takes me just a moment. And you will see up in front of you the words for the prayer, Ma Tovu, which is the way that we begin our morning worship every morning. And the reason why we've chosen this text is because it's a beautiful text that begins, "How fair are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel." And as we're thinking and talking and questioning and pondering and dreaming about what our temporary space is going to be, I can't think of anything more temporary than a tent. At least we're not moving to a tent. But "How fair are your tents, O Jacob" is the way that we've always begun our morning service as an appreciation for the space that we come together to pray and to be a community. And the second paragraph talks about, "I, through your abundant love, enter your house." And so I've been sort of keeping this text in my mind as I think about what really makes a house of worship a house of worship. It's really about making that space so that God's love can come there. And the way that we do that is through the community that we build. And nothing has shown me what an amazingly special community Temple Concord is than how we've managed to come together, even though we're all apart in our little Zoom squares here, in our homes, that our community is still going live, strong. We're still connecting. We're still having beautiful moments where we can come together to talk, to worship, to learn. And so I invite you to sing along with me. And you're muted, so you can sing nice and loud as you possibly can, and because nobody's judging. So here we go. Ma tovu, ma tovu. Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael, Ma tovu, ma tovu. Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. ואני ברוב חסדך אבוא ביתך אשתחווה לך על קודשך ביראתך מה טובו מה טובו אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל.
Thank you so much, Cantor. Thank you for leading us. And Rabbi, I've never heard you sing better, I have to say. It's hard to get the laugh when it's muted, you know? So as I said, the purpose of these calls is to really give you the agenda. So we are going to just let you ask any questions, make any comments that you'd like. We'll listen, we'll try to understand, we'll explain with answers as, as are appropriate for your questions. We have resources on this call. Rabbi and Cantor will probably be handling all of the ritual for sure, and some of the location questions in terms of physical space in the facility. Jeanette Mishral is the chair of the steering committee and is very conversant and fluent in what the whole process has been and can even talk about the sale. I think actually we'll let Jeanette start with an introduction to something that just happened yesterday. So before any questions. And then we'll go to your questions. Sally Cutler is on the call. Sally's been very involved in leading our contingency planning effort, so she can speak to any questions about planning and even some budgeting, potential budgeting issues. So I think we have kind of a nice little tag team here, and we'll do our best to answer every one of your questions, and we'll stay on the call as long as you have questions. For those who are not familiar with Zoom, I have to ask, where have you been for the last 2 months? Now, I have to say, if you click the participant tab, probably it's on the bottom of my screen. It might be at the top of some of yours, depending on what type of device you're on. If you click the participant tab, you'll see a list of everyone who's on the call And in the, I think, lower right-hand corner on mine, again, it might be in a different place on yours, there's a place where I can raise my hand. You see how my hand goes up on my screen? And that'll let us know that you have a question. And it keeps the hands raised in the order that they were raised. So if you raise your hand in that way, since we do have more people on the call today, there you go. Yep, some people know how to do it. So if you now lower your hands, and if all else fails, just do something like this and we'll know that you want to say something. All right, so Jeanette, I'll ask you, if you don't mind, just to provide an update on what happened at the Common Council yesterday. So if you can just briefly talk about that, and then we'll go to the congregation questions.
Okay. So yesterday, we overcame a huge hurdle. A couple of months ago, the Landmark Preservation Board voted to designate the entire parcel of 910 Madison Street as historic. Which meant that the developer would have had to jump through all kinds of hoops if they wanted to develop on the property, demolish part of the temple and develop on the property. The steering committee has been working with the common councilors, along with the help of Rabbi and Cherie and Sally and Ken, to help the developer redesignate the temple so that only the sanctuary was designated as protected. And yesterday, the Common Council voted to reverse the original decision of the Landmark Preservation Board and designated only the sanctuary as protected, which means that they actually designated the interior and the exterior, or the exterior and the interior, as protected. So that is a small hurdle for the developer to get over themselves, because that does include the bema and the choir loft. But I know they had plans anticipating that would happen. So this is a very good thing. It means that the developer can continue on. And just so you know, in light of everything that's going on with SU and the pandemic, we have no indication that the developer is looking to back out. They are still going full steam ahead, and it's looking very positive.
Thanks, Jeanette.
Yep.
So just thought that, people might be interested in that. It is late breaking news. I don't know that it made the news, but it's certainly big news for us. So thanks for that. Now, your questions, please. Again, if you can raise your hand, it'll help me kind of keep track, help me and Cantor and Rabbi keep track of the questions as they're coming up. And if you either can't figure that out or you just don't want to do it because you're just that kind of person, we'll take your questions anyway. Okay, I see Martin Weiss, you have a question. You'll have to unmute yourself and then you can ask your question. There you go.
Oh, okay.
We're set.
I just wanted to get caught up to date. God, it was about a year ago. We signed up for this, that, and the other committee. As I recall, one of them was what I call the committee to figure out what we want in a new building, and then a committee to figure out where we're going to put it. And so I wanted to know the status of those committees, because I hadn't heard anything.
Just for the record, can we keep those two committee names? Because those are great names.
Works for me.
Okay, Jeanette, I think you'd be the best person to take the first crack at this as the steering committee chair. And then if we need more information or have more to add to it, we can try that.
Sure. So Martin, you're talking about the future of our temple, the permanent site of our new temple, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So just to clarify, when you signed up last summer at the congregate meetings, those weren't official committees. They were to kind of get the interest of people, and we do have all of those lists. So you will be contacted when we do start to vision the new temple as we see it. I believe Ken, correct me if you're wrong, that leadership would like to start that over the summer. But as Rabbi has pointed out, given the COVID crisis and not being able to be together and such, we're not really sure what that timeline looks like right now. That being said, the plan is to have a 3-year lease with Temple Adith, begin our visioning as soon as possible, and have a plan to start moving with that plan within the second to third year. So, Rabbi, if you have some more information on that or your thoughts, I know you don't have more information. I know your thoughts.
Information too. And thank you for clarifying his question, Martin. I think I might have misunderstood in terms of the nature of those committees. So, Rabbi, if you'd like to say something, I know Sally wants to make a comment
Sure.
in response.
Very briefly, the next phase of this is going to involve a temple-wide visioning process where we're going to really need and want as many voices as possible, because the visioning process is a sense of deciding and accepting who we are today and who we want to become. And that can only be done well if it's done inclusively. And so the next step is going to be moving towards that. We know we're going to need some outside help in directing us to get to that point, to have people guide us through that visioning process. But I very much hope that that's one where we have, if not 100% participation, then really close, because visioning the future, I don't know that the next building we go to is going to be another 110-year building, but it's certainly going to be hopefully a good long while. And I want us to be able to plan for that collectively and to plan as best we can.
Thanks. And Sally, I know you've been heading up the both contingency planning effort, but also will be heading up the strategic planning effort for the board. And this certainly is going to be related to that.
Yeah, I absolutely want to second what the rabbi said. This is an incredible opportunity for us to look at ourselves in all different dimensions and think about what the world, what kind of world we want to create going forward. And Marty, I would really encourage you to jump into that feet first. 3 years sounds like a long time to be in a temporary location. But on the other hand, if you think about the kind of process that we want to go through in terms of this visioning, and then you think about actually trying to execute that process, 3 years is not all that much time.
Really.
So my expectation is that as soon as we can get our heads around the certainty of the sale, and it's sounding more and more like we're really moving forward on that. The Common Council decision yesterday was extraordinarily important. I think we're going to be wanting to start, and as Rabbi said, with some guidance, with some help from folks who have helped organizations move through these things before. I think we're going to want to start immediately thinking about, who are we and where do we want to be and what do we want that space to look like to hold what Cantor just talked about, which is the community. Because that's the intersection you're looking for, is an intersection of architecture and community.
Well,
and technology, obviously.
One of the beauties of German is I got lots of flexibility.
And I know from working with you, Marty, on the library that you've got great ideas. So be ready, because we will be, I would think, before we get to the fall even, starting to think about where we want that process to go.
Okay.
Thank you for the question, Mary. Thanks for the responses, Rabbi, Jeanette, and Sally. I see Danielle, your hand is raised. Let me unmute you and you can ask your question, please.
So can you hear me? Can you hear me? I said it says I'm muted. Can you hear me?
You're unmuted. We can hear you.
Okay. So we were talking about this in our family, and I guess our questions really have to do with about sharing space. Like, is there going to be designated space for Concord in the Adith building? And even the parking, like, we're concerned for the high holidays, for example. I don't think their parking lot could hold both congregations. So we were just wondering, like, what have those details been worked out, and how are we going to share that space?
Short answer is yes and no. And I'll let more expanded answers come from Rabbi, and Cantor can talk about the holidays and ritual aspect of things in terms of the shared space, and Jeanette will talk about other spaces and how those are going to be shared and uniquely ours.
So let me start with the holidays part. High holidays this fall, we're still going to be on Madison Street, number one. But number two, the strong likelihood is it's going to be like this on Zoom. The Cantor and I are already, I don't know, waist deep. We're beyond knee deep, probably waist deep, maybe a little higher in putting this all together. And what's clear now is that the entire high holiday process, from Slichot at the beginning all the way through the end of Sukkot to Simchat Torah, needs to be reimagined because, among other things, any kind of congregational singing is a problem because when you sing, you spray up to like 20 feet. And even with social distancing, that becomes an impossibility, which means the only way we could do high holidays in person is if we were seated 20 rows apart or doing no singing at all, neither of which quite work for us. In addition, even if we were together, you'd have things like spacing with restrooms and all of that. So the likelihood for this fall is we're going to be doing it like this on Zoom. Going forward, the agreement is that we've got shared space. So high holidays, my guess is one of us, that Adith will likely be in the sanctuary and we'll be in the social hall. The caveat there is to make sure that the sound doesn't bleed from one room to the other. And we'll check that and figure out what we need to do. And if it's an impossibility, then we'll have to find alternative space. That's it, at the earliest that could be an issue for us is a year from now. And even then, depending on treatment and vaccine and all that stuff, it's a huge unknown given the virus business. The whole virus thing kind of changes the outlook of how we're doing all of these pieces. In terms of week to week, we're going to be sharing space between the chapel and the sanctuary. So if a family has a bar mitzvah, a wedding, a funeral, whatever it is, they'll be able to choose what space they want. We're working very hard to make sure our calendars are supportive and not in conflict with each other. That's what I'm looking for. And right now we're clear up through 2022, and we're working on the 2022 B'nai Mitzvah calendar actually right now. We've been having meetings this last week. So I'm fairly confident that that part can be arranged. There's also the possibility for us to set up our own sort of temporary space. I don't know how to describe that, in a corner of the social hall, so that we could have a separate worship space if either the chapel or the sanctuary don't work out for us. And to be honest, the only way we're going to know that is to try it out. And so this is a little bit like moving into a new house where, you set up the furniture one way, and then after a few months you say, maybe the couch should be over there and the chair should be over here, and you fiddle around and figure it out. We're going to have to do the same thing. And I'm pretty comfortable in that the Cantor and I have a very strong, good working relationship with their clergy, and we'll be able to work all of that stuff out. And in any moving situation, whether we're moving to Temple Adith or moving anyplace else, we'd have some of that same kind of experimenting, shaking out different options and figuring out what works best. And so we'll have that going forward. But that's sort of an exciting, fun part of moving, and we'll work through it. Parking lot could be a little congested, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, and we'll prepare for it as best we can. I know they've had arrangements through the years to have extra parking across the way at CBA, and if that's what we need to do, we'll figure something out. But certainly parking is a better situation there than what it has been at Concord through the years, although we don't have the advantage of university garages around the corner. So, with everything, there are pluses and minuses, and we'll do our best to work through it.
Thanks, Rabbi. And the only limit to some of those things is going to be our own creativity and imagination. Valet parking could be an option. A question about handicapped parking has come up on previous calls, and so we will work together to find some of these things out. Before I go to Jeanette, Cantor, could you speak a little bit? I know you said when Rabbi said up to the knees, maybe up to the waist, you were saying up to your chin. Could you speak a little bit about the religious school? I don't know that Rabbi touched too much on that, but how we're sharing the space there and how that's going to work. And then Jeanette can supplement that as well.
Sure. So once we are in the building and sharing the space, We will be sharing some religious school classroom space. There are, we'll be using some of the classrooms in their school wing on the bottom floor, as well as a couple of the classrooms down the hallway, kind of on the way to the kitchen, if you have a picture of Edith in your mind. Those will be shared spaces, but they have maintenance staff that is very well versed in how to flip them, and so that is actually part of our deal, is that their maintenance staff will flip them for us, so that we'll be good and ready to go every Sunday morning when it's time to go in there. But there's also some meeting spaces and some smaller instruction spaces that will be just our own space. So smaller groupings or one-on-ones, there'll be plenty of room for those as well. And as you know, Edith is a large building, and so there are lots of other creative spaces that we'll be able to use should we need to on a Sunday morning. So we will be well taken care of. And Jeanette, do you have anything else that I forgot to mention that you want to mention? Because you know all the details pretty intimately.
No, you and Rabbi did a fine job. I will mention that the Syracuse Community Hebrew School will also be sharing the space like Temple Concord. So that is Wednesday nights, the Syracuse Community Hebrew School. You guys pretty much covered everything. There will be, we are doing some build outs to build Rabbi and Cantor their own offices. Certainly large enough to accommodate their needs and needs of the congregants. There will be a dedicated space of our own for our library. And as Cantor mentioned, there is lots and lots of space there to be creative with. Their two kitchens will be shared along with the social hall. So what else did I say? Oh, and signage. So we will have our own entrance, although we are welcome to use either entrance, and we will have our own signage on Kimber Road.
Yep. Thank you, Jeanette. Sally, I saw your hand go up and then go down. I'm guessing you might have had something you wanted to say about library. Do you feel like it's been covered? Okay, thanks. All right, thank you. Thank you for the question, Danielle, and thanks for the responses. Other questions, comments, opinions, thoughts, musings, ramblings? Elaine Rubenstein, I saw your physical hand go up. Let's unmute you.
I'm just speaking as an old timer in the fact that not only do I belong, I don't talk about belonging, but I support both temples. Very important as far as the education of the school on both schools. But I also mentioned I was brought up myself in Edith and have been very dedicated over many, many years, board member, et cetera, at Concord. But the most important thing I see going on is a great cooperation between not only the congregations, but the administrations and the clergy. And it just makes my heart warm to see good things happening. And this is going to be a good relationship. And both communities are going to grow and be benefited by this. I'm very happy the way this has worked out for the entire Jewish community and the big community to see us working together so well. So good job, everybody. And you've kept everybody in the membership here very aware. Ken, you've been doing a great job with the weekly reports and makes everybody feel part of it. So I think you're doing a terrific job. So that's my comment.
Thank you for your sharing your thoughts and feelings about that. Appreciate it. And it truly has been a tremendous team effort across the board. Hundreds, thousands of hours of man hours, people hours has gone into this. Thank you, Elaine. Let's see. I don't see any other hands up. I don't see anybody waving frantically. Oh, I see a hand. Steve Laffer. Steve.
No, you got to unmute.
Go ahead. No, I unmuted you. You're okay. Go.
Oh, hello again. After joining a meeting last week, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I had a couple of questions and comments. One was, and again, I want to pick up where Mrs. Rubenstein left off and say it's great to see the cooperation across the board. To further that, is that to say that if it works out, this could not become a long-term or permanent agreement with Temple Adith? Or is this definitely a 3-year in and out deal?
This is a 3-year, I'll speak to, from my perspective on it. The reason we said 3 years is to remind us all that this is a temporary location. The visioning process that we're going to engage in, sooner than later. Originally we were thinking that the sale was going to close early this summer, and that we'd be moving through the summer for various reasons, COVID, City Council, the Planning Commission, the Preservation Board, all that stuff, pushed things back a couple of months. So as Rabbi said, we'll likely be at 9/10 or some version of 9/10 for the High Holy Days this year. Our best estimate at this time is, our most hopeful estimate at this time is it'll be the end of this year that the closing could happen. My guess is that the visioning process will start no later than that and possibly sooner. And that's going to provide the answer to your question, Steve, in terms of what it can be. That's going to be part of what are our needs? What are our, when we think about the future, where could those needs be met? I don't think being in here in a temporary arrangement precludes the possibility of a long-term, but it's not the intention at this time. I think that's pretty fair to say. The other aspect of it that I want to say, I guess, is the possibility for sharing is there. I guess it always has been, and it can be enhanced. We can be sharing some services, programming. So by services, I don't necessarily mean religious services. But the purpose is, and our goal is, as we've said from the beginning, and I quote Rabbi when I say this, to maintain a Reformed Jewish presence, a Reformed Jewish congregation in Central New York. So in no way, shape, or form is this going to lead to a merger, regardless of where we're physically situated. We will continue to find ways to collaborate and work together, though.
I was not in any way implying a merger.
No, I know you weren't, but some people can sometimes.
I know of other temples in other cities and other locations that have shared facilities very successfully.
Yeah, and we'll be.
I know of some that haven't, but
we'll be
I wondered if that was on the table and a discussion by the board or board members or those powers to be, because that seems like a viable option with what I've heard about our congregation, and it's not growing, and Adith is shrinking a bit, or has shrunk, and ours has shrunk, and that their facility may be more than they need, and maybe we don't need a big facility, and that if the space is there, it might be worked out beneficial to both, and we could have our own identity in that location, as some other congregations have done. I just didn't know if the board had considered that as a possibility.
Yeah,
so tell you, my gut is that with a visioning process, you don't want to start with anything on or off the table. That you want to start a visioning process as wide open as humanly possible, with every option on and nothing removed, and then work through it and come to what makes the most sense. And I don't want to, my gut is, I wouldn't want to preclude and say we're absolutely going this way or absolutely not going that way without having input and conversations with all of us. This is about all of us as a community. And so the best answer I can give you is I don't know, but I personally wouldn't include or exclude any option.
Right. And that's what I was trying to say, Steve. By no means saying that you were implying a merger of in any sort, but sometimes people's minds might go there. But I second what Rabbi said. We're really looking to put the cart behind the horse. So we want the horse to be pulling the wagon and make sure that we're starting with our needs and interests as opposed to solutions. Neil Jasper, I saw your hand up, and then we'll come back to Danielle. Neil, I've unmuted you. Go ahead. Oh, wait, stop, Neil. Stop, Neil. Stop. Let me unmute you. I'm not able to. Try to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. I would yield to Danielle if her question is related to this conversation. Mine veers off a little bit.
Okay, Danielle, is your question related to this conversation?
Very much.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
We'll yield to you to ask your question first.
Well, thank you, Neil. It's nice to see you. So one of the other things that my family was talking about when we first heard about this was about the staff at our congregation, our maintenance staff, our security staff, and we were concerned about their situation. Are they going to be, necessary when we're in another building? Or are they going to, we're just concerned about them.
Yeah, thanks. Jeanette, could you speak a little bit about the deal, so to speak, and what it includes, and how that could affect staff?
Certainly. So the lease agreement between Temple Addith and Temple Concord includes all maintenance. So it's likely that Floyd's position as it is at Temple Concord would not be the same. That being said, Temple Addith has reached out to us and certainly is concerned, as you are, about the well-being of our staff, and has offered to use our maintenance staff for their maintenance staff. They will require additional maintenance staff in order to cover our needs, but it is included in our cost, so it would fall under the responsibility of Temple Addith. As far as the other staff, the lease does not include any provisions or doesn't talk about staffing needs at all, other than maintenance.
So in terms of the move, we wouldn't having a direct impact, except as Jeanette described. Okay, Neil, it is your turn. I'll let you unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. First of all, I want to say it's great to see as many of you here as you are. It shows a real interest in the future of the temple. I wrote a letter to Ken when he asked for information about preparing for comments of this meeting. And he wrote me a very nice reply addressing some of the issues. But I got a call this morning from Jeanette, thank you, which really went into the detail I was looking for. And I'm going to say, although I'm not from the original old school of membership, I'm from the past, let's put it that way. And one of the biggest things that I worry about is financial stability. You can look at a lot of the programs that are being thought of, a lot of the plans being put together, and you don't hear, unless you specifically start asking, well, what's this going to cost? How much is that change going to be? And how much of it is our responsibility versus Temple Addith? Now, of course, the areas we want to use are going to be changed by us, so I would assume that means it's our responsibility. But remember that once that happens, after the temporary positioning of Concord at Addith, those changes are now part of Addith. We no longer have that benefit. So with that in mind, I was very concerned about the dollar value of things being done, make changes to use Addith's facility. And I was satisfied with Jeanette's discussion with me of the fiscal responsibility the boards have been taking now, and Ken's hopeful assurance that we'll get down to a zero budget in a number of years ahead. Good luck. I want to be part of that, but good luck. In any case, a couple of things that came to mind following that, whatever we do, whether it's in the temporary assignment or a permanent allocation, we have to know that we have membership that will support us. We have to know that if we need X dollars per member and so many members at that rate, that we get that and maybe one or two extra for flexibility before we start putting our pocket out there and saying, okay, here's part of our endowment, enjoy and go build a building. You know that anytime you make changes or build to things, you're going to have expenses that were not foreseen. Everything goes over to some extent, so there's no guarantees. If we're looking at a $9 million budget coming out of this sale, and let's assume that's final numbers, all closing, whatever, and $3 million was to go in the direction of a new facility, and $6 million to the endowment. Even with $6 million sitting in the endowment, that's not a lot of money. And it's not a lot of money. You're not going to have some of the same expenses. You won't have the boiler in the old system. You won't have some of those, but other things will come up that we'll have to attend to. So no matter what we do, I'm satisfied with how you're looking at the temporary facility arrangements. But when we look beyond that, and apparently that's going to start next year, we have to stop looking at that endowment as anything we can utilize at all. If you have $3 million left, or you have $2.5 million left, which is where I think we're going to end up being if we're lucky, then that is all you can touch, unless you have fundraising for it, unless you have new members paying for it, if you have a building fund, all those things come into play. But that $6 million cannot be touched. And I've been there, Ken, so I know what you're dealing with. It's very tough to argue with members. It's very tough to deal with balanced budgets or low deficit budgets. It's very hard to deal with the rabbi. So I understand. I understand 100% what people are dealing with.
Yeah, when you said a zero budget, I saw Rabbi flinch a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I wanted to wake him up. But no matter what, we seem to have a rabbi that's in step with the congregation on most things, and that's very relieving feeling.
Yeah,
and it also shows that we have a congregation that seems willing to work with him and you on these different proposals. So all I want to emphasize to those who are listening, that we spread the word as time goes on, that there's money that we cannot touch. We can't look at what the sale was and say, oh, well, we have this we can spend. It's unavailable, just not there. Because God forbid we don't make it, that has to pay back the endowment.
Yeah. Thanks, Neil. Thanks for your comment. And you really are kind of channeling where we've been on this from the beginning. It's not just cooperative rabbi, it's cooperative cantor, it's cooperative executive director and staff, and I think very aligned board behind that. And that was part of my response to Neil's question that he was referring to, had to do with working towards a balanced budget, not a zero budget, but a zero deficit over the next several years. And this is kind of a little inside baseball for you on the call, so lucky you. We don't have the final numbers yet, but our projections for this year end is going to be a smaller deficit than we had initially budgeted, which is good and moving in the right direction. And, you know, some luck, I guess, if you can call COVID-19 luck, we were able to save some expenses that we might otherwise had incurred in terms of the use of the building. On the other hand, we had some unexpected expenses during the year too, like the boiler went out and we had to rent for $30,000 temporary heat for a good, through the winter. So overall though, our right now year-end projected deficit is going to be about $60,000 less than what we had budgeted for this year. So that's one piece of relatively good news. The, I think, more important piece of good news is the budget proposal that's coming forward that has been worked on by the Finance Committee. It involved staff and clergy. many hours of board members, the finance committee I mentioned, the executive committee, and other board members. So a very, very wide net was cast in developing this year's budget. And the goal is to actually have real cuts to expenses this year. So not just some savings on the unspent money, but we are going to be changing the trajectory. It was one of the goals that I think we articulated at the beginning of the year, which was we have to change the trajectory. And I think that we'll be doing it. And over the next few years, the goal is to get that to a zero deficit, not a zero budget, zero deficit. But of course, deficits come because we have less revenue than we have expense. It's not just that we have more expense than we have revenue. And that's the point that Neil is trying to make, that we need to have enhanced revenues too over this period. The board has made a commitment from the beginning when we first contemplated the sale a year ago that $6 million would be locked in Al Gore's virtual lockbox, and that's not going to be touched. So the $3 million is what we have to work with, plus additional fundraising that could come from congregation and outside the congregation, including possibly in this temporary location. There could be some grant money available that could help us because as Elaine mentioned, the cooperation among the congregations and and the leadership of the synagogues is going to be noticed and I think appreciated. Sally, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I had my hand up only because I think Art Bronstein is trying to get in and can't wave and can't raise his hand. So if you could unmute him, I think he probably has something to say. Art, are you there?
Art, you are unmuted. You may speak if you would like. Okay.
All right. Sorry about that.
We'll leave him unmuted, and if he makes a sound, we will hear it. Are there other questions or comments? Yeah, Ernie?
I don't have a good feel for timing, but who's going to be responsible for winterizing our current temple? The purchaser, if that goes that far, or us? $30,000, is that what it cost us? $30,000 to rent the equipment to heat the building?
That was through last roughly March. Go ahead, Sally.
I can speak to this, Ernie. There is a contingency meeting happening Monday where we are going to talk about if the timing is such that the closing is going to be in the spring, or even if it's in midwinter. We are looking at the contingency of the heat issue. We're looking at the contingency of the classroom use, which I think the Cantor and Cherie have pretty much worked out, because as many of you know, the second floor of the school wing is not usable as classroom space because of the leaking roof and the mold situation. So the contingency group is going to look at a whole array of options. But layer on top of that the fact of what Rabbi was saying about our inability to gather anyway. So it may be that what we're looking to do is to just get enough of a solution to tide us over through the winter. It probably is not, the best option is probably not to replace that boiler. The best option may not be to hire that external heating unit. It may be to develop some kind of temporary heating apparatus just to keep the building from freezing, basically. I think there is a possibility that and this is in the contingency planning discussion on Monday, that we could in fact ask the developer for some help with this. I'm not sure how that would play out. That's just a brainstormed idea that perhaps they would be willing to help us make sure that the sanctuary is adequately protected heat-wise. If you would like, I can send you the invite to the contingency planning group meeting on Monday. because we are looking at how do we make it through this next year if the building closing doesn't happen until the spring.
Yes, I'd be interested.
Okay.
The thing that is not obvious is the sanctuary originally was designed, and I have I had the original plans. I don't know what happened to them, but they're in my office, I believe, at the temple. But was originally designed as a dry system. And when they put the air conditioning in, the people didn't understand, and they cut off a part of this and made it a wet system. So half of the sanctuary is protected by a wet sprinkler system, and the other half of the sanctuary is protected by a dry sprinkler system. The advantage to the dry sprinkler system, of course, is it doesn't freeze.
Mm-hmm.
The wet side, why it was converted that way, I don't know. I looked at the plans, I looked at the installation, and I think there's something that should be done with it so that it's returned to a dry system.
Okay, I'll tell you what, Ernie, let's not have this conversation right now, but I will be sure that you get the invite to the meeting on Monday. And I would be very interested in hearing your whole perspective on this. So thanks very much.
Where do you think that meeting might be?
It's going to be a Zoom meeting.
A Zoom meeting. Okay.
Time?
It is from 9 to 10:30 on Monday morning, and Cherie will be sending out the link using the Temple Zoom account.
All right.
I'll make sure you get it.
Just as we've been having this conversation, I've been watching things coming in. Broadway just announced they're closed through September and likely through the end of December at least. What that means is if they're not willing to gather in person and they're dealing with singing and spraying, that's a pretty good indication of what we're going to be allowed to do. So the likelihood of us gathering in person, either on Madison Street or on Kimber Road anytime soon, is pretty slim for right now. And just so you're aware, we're watching all this closely. We're also very clearly taking our lead from science. As government leaders and business leaders start pushing to open things back up, we've made a commitment as a temple on moral grounds that we're going to follow what the scientists tell us and what the medical doctors are telling us. That's the place where we've got to be. That we want to protect lives as much as humanly possible. And so if things are turning as they appear to be turning, usage of the building isn't going to be an issue right away, which makes it a little bit more complicated, but
Really,
also changes
yeah,
the dynamic a bit.
It's about protecting the structure as much as it is the use.
Right.
So,
Right.
Ernie, I welcome your expertise.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Any other comments? I don't see any. Marty? Let me unmute you. Hold on. Okay, go ahead.
Just going to make a somewhat sarcastic comment that with what the rabbi just said about basing our decisions on science, that's pretty radical. To base it, to have science-based policies.
That's why Rabbi said that, I think. He's a radical. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yeah, Ernie? Go ahead, Ernie.
I was talking with Freddie Edelman, who's a member of the Adith community. And this was months ago. And he said to me, Ernie, there's all kinds of space in the area at Adith right now. And he didn't have any qualms about having space for us. Now he's only one member of the community at Adith, but I thought that might be of some help. He says they've got plenty of space, if not in the building, then on the grounds, and it may be something to look into a little bit more.
And that gets to some of the questions and comment discussion we were having earlier, based on one of Steve's questions about possibility, feasibility, suitability for it to be longer term. And that could, as Rabbi said, be a possibility. We're not precluding anything. We're not going in with any presumptions either. Thank you, Ernie.
Okay.
I'm going to mute you again. Any other comments, questions? Okay, if not, as we began this sacred gathering with a prayer, I will turn to our rabbi to kind of bookend what Cantor did in the beginning with some spiritual guidance and thoughts. Or
no singing. I promise no singing.
No.
Look, first of all, thank you for being here and for being a part of this. At its essence, what we're doing is about us. This is about how we interact with each other and how we come together and how the building and the physical structure helps us pursue our mission, as it were. And so while we'll be moving from one building to another, the essence of who we are as a congregation remains the same. We are the people of our congregation. We are the relationships that we share, that we're continuing to build. We are the hopes and dreams of 180 years going backward, and hopefully at least 180 years going forward. And so we are doing this as a community, coming together, recognizing that our times offer us unique challenges and unique opportunities, and we're going to work through them together. And I think it's important to come back to that essence, that at the end, at Sinai, God gave a gift, but it was the people coming together and accepting that gift that made Sinai such an extraordinary moment. And what we're doing now is that same kind of Sinai moment. It's us coming together and saying, how can we best move forward together? And that's at least what I'm certainly committed to, and I know the Cantor's committed to. And from my sense of it, so are all of you. And I think that's a wonderful place to be as we begin this journey together. So thank you all.
thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
All right, I got a thumbs up from Art, so we know he was out there. He obviously is a man of few words. Thank you, Art. Thank you all for being on this call. We have today Tuesday. We have one more scheduled for tomorrow. I'm not sure of the time, so if you have any other questions that occurred to you subsequent to this meeting, please, you can write to me through Cherie, the executive director, and you certainly can reach out directly to Cantor, Rabbi, Jeanette, Sally, any of us. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your day.